beginning was matter, and matter begot the amoeba. If there is no God, that is the series of events that is forced on a person. You see, you would have to suggest that the cosmos is all that there is, all that there was, or all that there ever will be. You would have to say that there's no intelligent, supernatural creator who brings life into existence. And so you would have to say that somewhere in the distant past, life arose from non-living chemicals. Now, there's a very serious scientific problem with this. It breaks one of the most fundamental biological laws known to humankind, the law of biogenesis. The law of biogenesis is very simple to understand. Bio means life, genesis means beginning. The law of biogenesis simply says that life comes from previously existing life of its own kind in our material, natural world. For years, people didn't think that that was the case, and so they naturally thought you could just get non-living chemicals to produce life. And they had examples for that. In fact, what they called scientific examples. They said, sure enough, if you will take a steak and place it on your kitchen counter in the middle of the summer and come back in maybe a week or two, do you know what you'll find? Oh, you'll find maggots that have spontaneously generated on that steak. And that was supposedly evidence of life coming from non-living chemicals. They said that's not all. If you were to take some old sweaty rags and you were to wrap them with some wheat and put them in the corner of a barn and come back in a month or so, you would have spontaneously generated mice and sometimes rats from the chemical properties of the air and the rags and the wheat. Well, several scientists were studying this and they thought, hold on just a second, we're not sure that these chemical processes are bringing about life. And they did some experiments. In fact, they're very famous experiments in virtually every biology textbook that you will ever read. One of them is by a man named Francisco Redi, or Francisco Redi. You spell his name R-E-D-I. His experiment was very, very simple. He simply took some meat, put it in a jar, several jars actually, and he put those jars to one side, and he didn't cover them or put anything on top of the jars. The other group of jars, he put meat in the bottom of those and hermetically sealed, airtight, these jars on this side, and then he watched. He watched as flies flew into the meat that was uncovered, and they tried to fly into the meat that was covered, and they couldn't. And maggots formed on the uncovered meat. Maggots did not form on the covered meat. And so he said, I think flies are producing maggots. Now, the naysayers of his experiment said, hold on just a second. Your problem is you didn't let air get into the meat in the sealed jars. And that's what it takes for spontaneous generation to occur, air to get into the meat. And so he said, well, let's try it again. Put some jars over here with meat in the bottom and no seal. Put some jars in the middle with meat in the bottom and gauze-like netting substance on the top. And then put the sealed jars with meat over here. Flies landed on the sealed jars, couldn't get in. Flies landed on the netting that was on top of the middle jars, and maggots formed on the netting, but not in the meat. And then over here, the maggots formed on the meat in the unsealed jars. So in 1660, Redi said, I think that flies are producing maggots. I don't think that they are spontaneously generating. And everybody said, we think you're right. But then basically when they asked him, what about other forms of life? Can they spontaneously generate? He said, yeah, just not maggots. Well, that idea continued for about another 200 years until the mid-1860s. In the mid-1860s, a man came along that you're probably very familiar with, even though you might not know that you are. If you were to go to your refrigerator in the morning and pull out a gallon of milk or apple juice, on the side of it, you would read that it's pasteurized. What does it mean that milk is pasteurized? Well, it means that there's a process called pasteurization that was named for a scientist named Louis Pasteur. Louis Pasteur proved once and for all that life doesn't spontaneously generate from non-living chemicals. In fact, in 1860, 1868 or so, around that time, Pasteur did some experiments where he would put meat broth or hay broth in the bottom of a flask, and he would boil it. And then in the 1860s, they had microscopes, and they would zoom in on that broth, and they would see that before he boiled it, there were millions of swimming microscopic organisms. After he boiled it, it killed all of those microscopic organisms. Well, the interesting thing about this particular experiment was that those flasks had a special S-shaped curve, so air could get back into the broth, but that special S shape was designed to catch all microscopic organisms as they went through the neck, and it was very effective. It did. Some of those flasks he would keep for over a year and then break the neck off. The air would go back unhindered to the meat broth, and microscopic organisms would form. Reedy, Pasteur, other scientists who did experiments like this proved once and for all that life does not come from non-living chemicals. In fact, evolutionist Martin Moe correctly commented that a century of sensational discoveries in the biological sciences has taught us that life arises only from life. Even the eminent evolutionist George Gaylord Simpson observed that there is no serious doubt that biogenesis is the rule, that life comes only from other life, that a cell, the unit of life, is always and exclusively the product or offspring of another cell. Now that puts people who don't believe in God in a very serious quandary. If this material universe is all that there is and all that there was and all that there ever will be, and life somehow in the beginning came from non-living chemicals, and yet every single scientific experiment ever done in the biological sciences proves that can't be the case, then what's the alternative? Well, the alternative is that there was a supernatural intelligent being at the beginning who brought life into existence. Now, what you'll hear from the atheistic evolutionary teaching is that we just haven't found how life came from non-living chemicals. We think it did. We suggest it had to. Like George Wald said back in 1950, he said, to make an organism demands the right substances in the right proportions and in the right arrangement. We do not think that anything more is needed, but that is problem enough. One has only to contemplate the magnitude of this task to concede that the spontaneous generation of a living organism is impossible. And yet, here we are. You see, he says, hey, this isn't possible, yet we're here, so it must have happened in the past. So we've got to find out how it did happen. And yet here's the problem. It's not that science hasn't found the answer yet. It's that science has found the answer, and the answer is that spontaneous generation is impossible in nature. It's not as if one day we're going to find the answer, as if we do a million more experiments, it's still out there. We're just in a system or situation of doubt right now. No, listen. Every single scientific experiment in biology ever done proves that life cannot spontaneously generate from non-living chemicals. About 50 years after Wald made his statement, Kenneth Miller and Joseph Levine, in their book Biology, wrote that Louis Pasteur convinced other scientists that the hypothesis of spontaneous generation was not correct. In other words, Pasteur showed that all living things come from other living things. This change in thinking represented a major shift in the way scientists viewed living things. Major shift indeed. If that statement is true, and scientifically it's one of the most valid scientific statements ever made, atheism cannot be true. And in the beginning, God is the real scientific answer.
Dr. John Dee's long-distance observations were of the Rampion Wind Farm, which is located 8 miles off the coast of England, between England and France. I have identified his approximate coordinates here, in front of the Worthing Sailing Club. Here is more documentation regarding the location of the wind farm. We are concerned with these 6 turbines on the left, numbered 1 through 6, which will appear on the right-hand side of the actual video. From the observer's position, the closest of those 6 turbines was a little over 8 miles away, and the furthest of the turbines was nearly 11.2 miles away from the camera. Now, Dr. John did film from 2 different camera heights, 2 feet and 3.5 feet. I'm going to be concentrating on the 3.5 foot footage. Here's footage of his camera at 3.5 feet, and also shows his location in front of the Worthing Sailing Club. Under the globe model, the horizon marks the physical point at which the purported curvature begins to obstruct distant objects. Dr. John D. defined the globe physical geometric horizon as the maximum distance that the sea and the sky can be observed to meet. It's a good definition. You can calculate the distance to the alleged globe horizon by multiplying 1.225 and the square root of the observer's height in feet. Or you can just use an online calculator like this Earth curvature calculator that uses the official globe dimensions. So, according to the official globe math, at a 3.5 foot observation height, the physical horizon would have to be closer than a mere 2.3 miles, and that's assuming a perfectly smooth ball. So, large waves, miraging, and atmospheric opacity may easily reduce that distance to the alleged physical horizon, but there's no way to increase the distance to the globe physical horizon without increasing the elevation of the camera. For brevity, I'm leaving out much of Dr. John D's footage, but you should go and watch it all. I chose this specific footage because there is a distant boat far behind those 6 turbines. Of course, the boat should be entirely hidden behind the supposed ball of Earth, but that's not what I want to address. Because the boat is higher perspectively than the base of the turbine that was 11.2 miles away, we know, as a matter of fact, that there is absolutely not even a centimeter of curvature present. Remember, according to the globe, the horizon was supposed to be closer than 2.3 miles, and that horizon is far beyond the turbine, beyond 11.2 miles. What is the reasonable implication of this video evidence? This is indisputable evidence that there is no measurable curvature when the globe model says that the curvature should be easy to measure and detect over these distances. Because the curvature does not exist.
NASA's next spacecraft, already being built and tested across America, will do those things and more.
It is the spacecraft that's going to take humans to explore the solar system. It's the next big step for NASA in exploration.
Called the Orion PCB, this next-generation spacecraft will enable America to explore beyond low Earth orbit. 2.
As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation. But Orion has protection. Shielding will be put to the test as the vehicle cuts through the waves of radiation. Sensors aboard will record radiation levels for scientists to study. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space.
3.
The plan that NASA has is to build a rocket called SLS, which is a heavy lift rocket. It's something that is much bigger than what we have today, and it will be able to launch the Orion capsule with humans on board, as well as landers or other components to destinations beyond Earth orbit. Right now, we only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go, and this new system that we're building is going to allow us to go beyond and hopefully take humans into the solar system to explore. So the moon, Mars, asteroids, there's a lot of destinations that we could go to, and we're building these building block components in order to allow us to do that eventually.
4.
The kinds of technologies that we're testing out on space stations with our goals of going beyond low Earth orbit. So we have a really robust exploration program at NASA.
We are setting a course with specific and achievable milestones. Early in the next decade, a set of crewed flights will test and prove the systems required for exploration beyond low Earth orbit.
This video was uploaded by the International Astronautical Federation, and like a good reporter or a good journalist, I check my sources, and this is what Wikipedia told me. It's an international space advocacy organization based in Paris and founded in 1951 as a non-government, but it's full of governmental people. But that doesn't matter. It's uploaded by them. I will link the video so you can all watch it. And maybe you can put some comments on the original video, but please be polite.
It's running properly. The next scene you'll see from the cockpit is when the solid rocket boosters departed, and that was really a bright flash.
This is all showing the rocket from the Earth going to space. This is the real part because it is real. But now the rocket is getting into space, so now the fakery comes in. This is the time when you watch the recent rocket launches. This is when they switch to animations. But back in the time there was no software to make animations, so they had to do something else to convince you that the rocket is in space. These days they just use cartoons. It's kind of insane that people believe cartoons. Do you wonder how they used to do it 30 or 40 years ago? Do you remember Thunderbirds? It's just a bunch of tiny models in a dark room with some special effects. But at least Thunderbirds did a decent job, because in Thunderbirds you never saw a guy in the background showing up. So this video is an astronaut explaining the mission. It's not like practice footage or anything. Watch closely.
Arrangement. Dan sat in the pilot seat during this operation, sort of monitoring the motion of the vehicle, making sure that it was steady and that there were very few vibrations of any sort. Here's a picture of the INSAT actually being deployed from the spacecraft. You can see that the deployment went very smoothly. At the moment
Did you see it in the background? There was, man, I'm not kidding you. You can see someone in the background. There's a guy moving in the background. Here, watch it again, watch it closely. I looked up, or I tried to look up the size of this rocket. I found this picture. You can see it's massive. So if that rocket is in space and if there's a guy in the background in that footage, that means that there are like giants, but like in space, looking at NASA. That's probably why they don't dare to go back to the moon and why they hide so much stuff. Space is full of giants. Well, NASA, this video was a lot of fun to watch. There's a lot of weird things in this.
about a minute 20 seconds after deployment, you can see some of the...
Here you can see how they switch on the light of the Earth. It's kind of funny, isn't it? How do you explain all this shit? But at least you can see that the Earth is a ball. At least they are not hiding the shape of the Earth. Or maybe is it a fisheye lens? Oh, the satellites start to spin for the video. Well, at least we see it's a ball, you know. It's even more a ball when it goes down. And it doesn't look like it's in outer space, it looks like high altitude at most.
cameras that we can see the curve visible at 35,000 feet. But when we're watching an amateur balloon flight without a fisheye lens or a wide-angle lens on it, there is no curve to be seen. And basically, if we were living on a ball or a sphere of any sort, no matter how high you rise, you would have to look down to see the horizon. Yet when you take these cameras to 100,000 feet, the horizon is still at eye level. That's inconsistent with any kind of spherical shape.
CGI fakes. And the early ones were literally taken through a round window to make the Earth appear round. Literally taken through a round window to make the Earth appear round.
Oh, this is a shot from 130,000 miles out. I guess it's from approaching the moon, looking back at the Earth. If that's the Earth, is that like another spacecraft?
No. That, I have no idea what that is. It's some aberration on the film of some sort. Oh, those are shadows, I think. Or reflection, probably reflections that are just reflecting.
Run that back again so we get another shot of it.
Okay, turn off the camera. Your interview is done. I've given you all the time I'm going to give you.
Okie dokie. Good to meet you.
I don't say it's a pleasure.
I understand.
Please get your ass out of my house.
Okay.
And you came here under false pretenses, and I think you're an asshole.
Lying about going to the moon is a satanic lie of gigantic proportions.
I don't hit people, but you're going to be on the deck unless you...
I'm heading out. I appreciate it. And get the hell out of my house.
You'll get a gun, shoot them at them before they get out of the office?
We have a video camera running if you want to do it.
Right.
That would be great footage for us. See you later. In court, I hope. Going to the CIA? Had them whacked. Where you put a transparency over the window and move the camera of the Earth and move the camera back away from the window. Turn off the lights in the spacecraft and appeared to be halfway to the moon when in fact they were in Earth orbit.
Really?
Yeah, and they said it was the same way that you did it on Apollo 10. So we wanted to give you the opportunity to put your left hand on the Bible, to raise your right hand, to swear to God.
Stick it in your ear.
If you walked on the moon, we're giving the opportunity to swear to God that you walked on the moon.
I'm going to give you the opportunity to get the hell knocked out of you so you don't leave me alone.
We found a very unique reel of footage that we have queued up to show you.
Yeah.
And it's from the mission. And to our knowledge, no one has ever seen it before. And it's 30 years old.
And you want me to see this while you have me on camera?
Well, and to tell us what it is. That's correct. And you'll see this tape proves it.
Okay, well, I'm not interested in satisfying your suppositions when there's all this evidence that we did.
This proves, as you see, that you're using the window to demonstrate that you were halfway to the moon when you were...
Turn the camera off, please. Turn the camera off. Well, you're talking to the wrong guy. Why don't you talk to the administrator at NASA? We're passengers. We're guys going on a flight.
You're a coward and a liar and a thief. Did you see shooting stars? Did you see the shooting stars?
Yeah, I'm getting to that.
Oh, okay.
But a lot of noise going on. So I don't know the results of some of the experiments they've conducted. The point is they can't get that far from here, and they're really in the protective confines of the Earth. They're really in the protective confines of the Earth. They're really in the protective
International Space Crew attempted a spacewalk outside the station. Here's a live look at the astronauts. Well, I don't believe. Actually,
So this is photo trickery and brainwashing that's got the world thinking not a cosmic accidental sneeze, nothingness turned everything. This is quite obviously intelligently designed, this thing we're experiencing here, this life, this universe. I can't believe anyone in their right mind can look me in the eyes with a straight face and say, no man, it's all random.